Support Rainbow Soul. Check out the Rainbow Soul merchandise for your favorite new shirt. A variety of colors and styles to suit your taste. Show off your love for Rainbow Soul. Get cool designs with your favorite quotes. Designs come in a variety of colors so that you can express your most authentic self. Support Rainbow Soul in spreading the word that queer, gender variant, intersex, transgender is sacred. Rainbow Soul, putting the soul back into queer. Order your unique Rainbow Soul merchandise at rainbowsoul.show.
Welcome to Rainbow Soul, a live show and podcast in search of deep answers and medicine about consciousness, spirituality, witchcraft, natural magic, and queer, inclusive spiritual paths of many varieties. We will explore the use of herbs, candles, colors, and nature in our personal lives, as well as queer-inspired rituals designed with transgender and non-binary people in mind. We are welcoming all pagans, indigenous two-spirits, witchy folks, conscious seekers, and people off the beaten path who want to explore the human spiritual experience that we are all capable of having. With the deep reverence in anti-racist values, inclusivity, and a healthy and honest respect for our ancestors, Rainbow Soul brings diverse guests and topics all related to queer spiritual experience. Tap into this amazing resource live and find a supportive, safe environment while exploring interesting topics and diverse guests. Listen on your favorite podcast platform and catch the show at your convenience and still participate in the contest and games. Get more information about games and contests at our website, rainbowsoul.show. rainbowsoul.show. Thank you for tuning in to Rainbow Soul.
Welcome, everyone. Oops, I was muted. I am excited to be bringing Rainbow Soul to you this week. I am Hollis Taylor, one of the hosts of the show, and you can find out more about me at divineandrogen.com. I offer all sorts of psychic services and spiritual mentoring and things like that, and I also have a book. And this is my partner, Brighthawk.
Well, hey there. Good to be back at Rainbow Soul. I'm a musician. I'm a storyteller. I'm the author of the book, The Dancing Hippo, a wonderful gender-neutral book about resilience, about shining your light, about being your most authentic, fabulous self. I'm probably pagan and Buddhist identified, grew up a Catholic, and we all know what the recovering Catholic thing means. So it's good to be here celebrating queer spirituality on Rainbow Soul.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so glad to be doing this show with you today, Brighthawk. And, first thing we should do is take a moment to breathe, my friends. So I want to invite you that no matter where you are, if you're in your car, please don't close your eyes. Or if you're doing something else that requires your eyes open, please keep them open. But you can take a moment to take a few deep breaths. So allow your heart to take off with the music. Just allow your spirit to stay calm for just this moment. Take in a nice, deep, deep breath. Take it in, And then blow out until you have nothing else left to blow out. And just allow your body to relax in this moment and understand that some new information might be coming your way here soon. And that your mind is open like a flower. You can actually envision your mind opening up to receive water, which is kind of like knowledge. Knowledge is the water in life. Take a deep breath, open your mind, and just blow out. Now, I'm so glad you took this moment to breathe with us. And I'm hoping that you'll enjoy today's show because let me just say that this has been a really hard topic for me to chase down a person that could talk about it that had some experience. That I did have an older woman that was willing to teach, um, but unfortunately, she's not available anymore. And anyway, so in honor of her, I'm just going to say she's passed on. She's on the other side now. And so we want to just honor her. We can just honor our elders that have passed on. And I am excited today to bring on a person that has written a very cool book. So I'm hoping that you guys will check this out. And today's topic is all about the Qabala. And I think I'm saying it right, but I want to bring our guest out to make sure. Okay. So here's my guest, and their name is Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're so grateful you're here, Enfys. And I mean, it's just super exciting to think about your book because I know that it's kind of one of a kind. So, can you tell us about who you are and like how you identify and what your spirituality is kind of made up of?
Sure, I'm Enfys. My pronouns are they, them. I am a third degree initiate and high priest of the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel syncretic Wiccan tradition based out on the mid Atlantic. I am a musician, an author, as you mentioned. I have a very wild and wonderful life. So that's, I think, the start of the answer of the question. I'm the author of the book Queer Qabala, which is what I'm going to be talking about here today. And there are different ways to pronounce it. Like there are so many different pronunciations for all the different things. So Kabbalah works, Qabala works as well.
So why don't we start there? What does it mean? What is that word? Where does that word come from?
Well, it's a very long story that I'm going to try to condense. So, the particular branch of Kabbalah study that I am part of is the mystical tradition that is sort of an offshoot of the Jewish tradition of Kabbalah, usually pronounced in that tradition, which goes back well over 1,000 years. Uh, Kabbalah is a type of a reality map, to borrow a phrase from Christopher Penczak. It is a way to understand life, the universe, and everything, our relationship to the divine, our relationships within our own selves. It is a really fantastic magical tool that helps you understand the different forces at play when things come into manifestation. And yeah, it's ways to understand levels of consciousness. It's something I really groove on, and I was kind of surprised to find I was in a lonely club within my tradition of people who really enjoyed it. So I've been trying to make it more interesting and easier to digest for more people to find what I think is a really, really cool spiritual tool.
Mhm. So it's mostly from people of the Jewish background, like the Jewish tradition, right?
So the origins of what we call the tree of life, which is the glyph that is the focus of of Kabbalah do originate in Jewish tradition. The offshoot I am part of is more the non-Jewish mystical tradition that's been going for about 500 or so years. There was some phenomenal interspiritual collaboration that happened in Spain in the 15 and 1600s, to the point where if someone went to Spain, you knew they were probably doing some spiritual thing, right? So there was a lot of really great cross-pollination and sharing from different groups and different cultures. And where you see Kabbalah today is a lot of times in the Western ceremonial magic tradition of paganism. So what I like to call that is sort of the use the scientific method and apply it to magic, if it's repeatable, testable, etc. So that is where we see it outside of the Jewish tradition, but we do honor the roots of the tool within the Jewish tradition and the long history that it has.
Okay.
Does it have any? It seems like it came up around the same time as alchemy. Is there any cross over there?
Oh, yeah, there are so many different overlaps.
Okay.
One of the cool things about it is that Kabbalah is sort of a key to help you understand other systems. So there's definitely some correspondences with alchemy, also tarot, very closely entwined. In fact, one of my teachers says that Kabbalah is the operating system of most modern tarot decks because it maps so cleanly to the Tree of Life. It also has a lot of great correspondences in astrology. So if you understand tarot, but not Kabbalah, not astrology, you can learn more about those things by seeing how they interplay. And likewise with the other two systems. The more you know about one, the better you can understand the others.
Yeah, we had a guest discussing human design and said Kabbalah was part of the background of that. Obviously, astrology is part of the background. And is it numerology? There was some other piece.
I thought it was enneagram.
Enneagrams?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was fascinating to see how many different systems have these interconnecting pieces.
Exactly. Like Neoplatonists, people who are studying Plato and Aristotle and the ancient Greek philosophers, a lot of that gets distilled down into the Tree of Life as well, which is pretty fascinating.
Okay. Well, can you tell us more about the Tree of Life? I mean, I feel like I've heard it, but what does that really mean?
What does it mean? The Tree of Life is a glyph consisting of 10 spheres or circles or Sephiroth, and also 22 lines connecting them in a pattern. Those lines are called paths. So if you look at the Tree of Life, it's kind of a sacred geometry sort of look. You have these circles connected by lines. And what you see on the Tree of Life is at the very top, with the topmost sphere and the top triangle, is where we experience complete unity with the source. It is the highest vibration, if you will, if you work with the concept of vibrations. It is the ultimate source and destination of everything that exists. And at the very bottom of the tree, you have absolute manifestation. So things that are part of our consensus reality, as well as our immediate overworld and underworld. So you look through the tree and see those connecting paths to see the patterns which things take to go from being mere potential down into manifested reality. So it's a particularly useful, chewy tool for those who are trying to enhance spell work to make things happen in their lives, like get a new job or, find, someone who will resonate with you and in a loving relationship, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Wow, that's really fascinating.
How were you attracted to it? What drew you in? What was your story of how you got hooked? I'm always fascinated by these. There's always a compelling calling somehow.
One of the first phrases in the book is, I fell in love with Kabbalah despite myself, because there is nothing about me that would be like, this is a person who would really enjoy ceremonial magic Kabbalah. I was a gifted child who grew into an impatient adult who does not like things I can't immediately grasp. And, I really scorn any kind of like patriarchal overlays with my magic. And a lot of the ways Kabbalah is traditionally taught is a very patriarchal, hierarchical kind of viewpoint. But when I first started learning about it, because it is very foundational to a lot of the rituals and spell workings we do within my tradition, I really wanted to understand what made magic work. What was it? What's like the secret sauce? How do we understand this from like maybe a mathematical or more of a, descriptive sort of glyph way? How do I know how magic works? And so I started to learn about it, and my initial experiences learning about it were simultaneously fascinating and frustrating. It's fascinating because it's clearly something you could study for your entire life and still only scratch the surface. It's frustrating, partly because you could study it your whole life and only scratch the surface. You're never going to completely get the whole thing. But what I found most frustrating is a lot of the books that teach about Kabbalah teach it in this very patriarchal, heteronormative, binary gender kind of way. And the deeper I got into my studies of it, because I was determined to like it and determined to enjoy it, because there was just something really hooking me that I can't articulate. It was just, there's something here, and I really need to keep digging. But when I started working on it more deeply and teaching it to others, I realized, wow, this is actually fundamentally a queer affirming spiritual tool, not just in terms of, non-heterosexuality, but also in terms of gender and very non-binary affirming. And myself as a non-binary person, I was elated to realize and see myself in my magic. And that's what made me super fall in love with it. But then I just kept reading more and more books, and they're all saying things like, well, and then the masculine and the feminine, and da 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 da. And I was like, but you're not getting it. Like, there's this piece that is missing from a lot of these other books. And so I started blogging about it on majorarqueerna.com, which is my website. And one of my mentors says, you've probably got enough to write a book here. And I thought, no, I mean, my mentor's been studying it for 40 years. I've been studying it for now about 10. Like, I don't know nearly enough about this to write a book. Are you crazy? Are you kidding me? And then the pandemic hit, and suddenly I had all this extra time. So I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I start writing it. Maybe I decide it's not a book. I'll just keep it on the blog, and I have a lot of stuff I can mine for content later. What the heck? I've, written half of it. I'll submit it to a publisher. Haha. See if they actually want to publish it. Well, that's fantastic and terrifying. So that is how the book Queer Qabala came to be.
That's a great story. I love a good story.
Yeah, and the thing that I really I hear you with is that, so a person that I've been looking to try to cover Kabbalah for a long time now, since the beginning of the show, actually, because our other co-host is Jewish, and he was very curious. And the only person I knew was in her 70s.
Yeah, I would
And
venture a guess.
she was unable to do the show for health reasons for a while, and now she's passed. But what I found very interesting is one of the things that she said to me was, the only thing about teaching Kabbalah on your show is that, and that's exactly what she told me was the biggest problem, was the gender stuff. And she said, and then on top of that, she was concerned that she had always learned it about the masculine being empowered, and she felt that needed to change. She felt that, like, when she had learned that the masculine was all of the power, and that the women almost had no power. So that's a misconception about Kabbalah that I think I'm glad we're addressing right now, to say that's not always true. Are there some other misconceptions about Kabbalah that are out there?
So many. One
Okay.
of the other frustrating pieces about studying it was there seemed to be this emphasis on lots and lots of tables of correspondences that you're expected to memorize, which is not really how a lot of people learn. And when that is the first thing presented to you, is like, here's this diagram. Here are all the things that go on the diagram. Now process that and make magic with it. And it's like, no, that's not a good starting point. Like, that's great for when you want to deepen your study and be like, okay, I really want to work with crystals that align to specific spheres. I really want to work with herbs in that context. Like, there's so much you can do with it, which is great. But I think before you run, you have to walk. And so one of my goals with the book was, can I teach this in a way that makes sense to someone who's never heard of Kabbalah before, where this is their first introduction to it? They don't know where it came from, they don't know what it is, but maybe they're interested, and maybe the title interests them because they're someone who identifies as queer and they just want to find spiritual tools that work for them. And so I basically threw out the tables of correspondences, except for two. I kept tarot and astrology because I think those are really relevant for a lot of folks. But I'm like, let me give you the experience of this sphere before I dive in and tell you all the crunchy bits about it. Like, here's some basics, but here's a path working you can enjoy and really feel what that energy is like. And that was a really fun thing to do, and also really challenging.
I bet. Because I've written a book about queer spirituality, and I found it to be a challenge. And I was coming from more of the Wicca, pagan, witchy perspective. So,
Right.
interesting here. Dana Evans, saying, "I've done serious workings based on Kabbalah and brought intense action in my life, like the next day. Maybe I had intuition about the coming action, but the action was clearly related to my concern. What do you think about timing and workings?"
That's amazing that you got such immediate results from it. That's fantastic. A lot of my workings with the tree are kind of like long-term things, like where I'm like, all right, I want to make sure I bring a great job into my life that brings me health and, makes me feel fulfilled and all this. And I spend months on it, kind of thing. So doing a working and then the next day you've got results. Fantastic. Like, kudos. There's a lot you can do with timing, and this is where some of those overlays come into play. Like, if you work with the planetary hours, for example, within astrology, if you're like, okay, I'm going to really work with, let's say, Jupiter, that kind of energy. I want to get some like big expansive feels and thinking and really get something new and some new vision on the horizon. Well, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can work with Hesed, which is the sphere on the tree aligned with Jupiter, and its color is blue, and it's the fifth sphere. So you can start thinking, okay, so we've got the number five, or fourth sphere, sorry, fifth is Gebra. So you can be like, okay, let's work with the number 4. Maybe on my altar, I'm going to have 4 of the same thing. Maybe I'm going to take the 4s from the minor arcana of my tarot deck and put them out. Maybe I'm going to take the color blue and make that my altar cloth. And maybe I'm going to do it at the planetary hour for Jupiter. Maybe I'm going to do it, when that energy seems to be the best. Like, the more correspondences you can get of the same thing, the more you can call that energy in to what you're trying to do.
So I know a lot of the Jewish calendar is based on the moon, right? The lunar cycles.
I believe so, yeah. I wasn't raised Jewish, so I can't speak
I know.
deeply to that aspect of things, yeah.
Where's lacrosse when we need him? But is Kabbalah line up with the lunar cycles, or is it just more specific, like what you were just describing with the planets?
I haven't actually looked at it from the lunar cycle in particular. Usually, the way I work with it is with the planetary correspondences and planetary hours or planetary days of the week, or, when the planets are lined up in a certain way, that kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
Oh,
Interesting.
cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up Eve's comment. They said, "I have always been drawn to Kabbalah as I have some Germanic Jewish roots in my heritage. I particularly found aspects relating to Shekinah helpful, as all religious stuff I had prior was masculine focused power." I'm not sure who Shekinah
Yeah.
is. Is that must be a goddess?
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar as well. So
Okay.
if you have more information on that, that'd be great. There are also some fantastic books from folks, not only from people who have been raised in the Jewish tradition or have Jewish ancestry but practice magic and witchcraft right now as part of their holistic approach to their spirituality. There's one that just came out in July called Falling Through the Tree of Life, Embodied Qabala. And it's by Jane Meredith, who's written many fantastic pagan books. But her approach is a very visceral, experiential approach to the tree. It's more like she is a guide pointing you in the direction, but you're going on your own journey there and you're figuring out what works for you on that roadmap. It's really brilliantly and beautifully written. It's basically a giant love letter of Kabbalah. The other one that really kind of got me thinking on the queerness vibe was Rachel Pollack, who's famed for a lot of her tarot books. She wrote a Kabbalah book called The Kabbalah Tree. And one of sort of the offhand mentions in that book was, hey, did you know that the Hebrew names of the spheres have either masculine or feminine endings? And then you look and there's like a masculine and a feminine pillar. And you would think, okay, well, the feminine endings are on the feminine pillar and the masculine. No, they're not. Actually, there's some really interesting inconsistencies with how gender is portrayed on the tree, which is kind of what started me pulling on this thread a little bit. And I sort of had a head slap moment because I was like, wait a minute. There's a masculine pillar, feminine pillar. Sure, they're also known as pillars of force and form, mercy and severity. But there's this third pillar in the middle called the pillar of balance, which I like to call the non-binary pillar. So it's like already just looking at the glyph for the first time, you're like, hey, they acknowledge there's more than binary forces at play here because you've got three pillars. You've got three supernal, you've got a lot of threes on the tree. You've got the supernal triad and you've got the astral triad and things like that. So they just keep coming up, kind of like this is what the spirit is trying to tell us, hey, look, more than just two here. You have to acknowledge the whole of what's available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of like the reflection of what I've seen in Wicca, mostly because I just had different experiences than other people. But I kept hearing from non-binary people that it was a very binary thing, and I'm like, oh no, it's not. Because I had sort of experienced Wicca with God, goddess, both, and neither. So yeah, there's a masculine and feminine, but there's also a both and a neither. So for me, that really worked for me, and I was wondering, that showed up only because of the radical feminists. Let me just give them credit for that. Okay. But what you're talking about is just a middle thing. Is there any distinction about or any belief system or anything like that about being queer, or like is there history way back, like for Wicca and traditional spiritual paths? Sometimes back in the history, if you look back far enough, you find out that the queer people, that the non-binary transgender people were actually like shamans and or special people within the tribe, like special magical people in the tribe. And so I was wondering if you ever had that kind of thing come up in Kabbalah.
Well, what I found interesting is a lot of the way the tree to me is very inherently queer without me having to put rainbow glitter on it at all. I'm just pointing to things other people said from 100 or more years ago. Like the names of the spheres, I didn't come up with that. Like that's what they are. I didn't come up with the three pillars or any of that. Like there's a lot right when you just look at it from a different way than a lot of the books look at it, where they're just like, masculine, feminine. There was even one of the traditional texts, I believe it was the Zohar, where there's a line about, and unless you have both masculine and feminine within you, you will not experience the divine, or something to that effect. And the author's translation note is, this is why it's so important to get married. And I'm like, is it though? Is that what it's saying? Like these old texts that to me are saying pretty strongly, hey, there's more than two and there's a lot of gray area between. It really struck me how inherently queer and inherently queer friendly the tree is. And also that middle pillar, it's not like, I know sometimes people are like, oh, non-binary, the third gender, where you dress like X and you look like Y. No. The middle pillar on the tree is a combination transmutation and also its own thing. It's not just halfway between masculine and feminine. It's actually digesting the powers from both and creating something new with its own unique addition.
That's beautiful, beautiful. It's kind of like alchemy in that way.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a lot. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
correspondence. I haven't dived super deep into alchemy, but yeah, there's a lot of correspondences you
Maybe
can
we
have
need to
there.
trade books.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking right now. But anyway,
Nice.
so Eve says they came back with that Shekinah is the feminine
Ah.
spirit aspect of spirit. Greek used the term Sophia. The Solomonic writings translate it as wisdom and use the feminine pronouns when translated into English.
Yeah, that's actually, thank you for bringing that up because that is one of the pieces of Rachel Pollack's book that I found the most fascinating is the the supernal triad of the tree, the top three circles on the tree, let's put it that way. There's one right in the middle on that middle pillar, and then there's one on either side, one on the masculine pillar, one on the feminine. And the one on the masculine pillar is called Hakma, and it is supposed to be like the typical divine masculine, the cosmic phallus, all this kind of thing. And then Bina, who is on the feminine pillar, is supposed to be like the ultimate passive receptive divine feminine. But Rachel Pollack points out that Hakma and Bina are both feminine names in Hebrew, and Hakma means wisdom and Bina means understanding. And if you read in the Bible, they actually are personified feminine characters who are co-creators with God of Earth. So that was one of those, whoa, wait a minute. Because if there was one thing I was pretty sure was binary on the tree, it was those two spheres. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're not. They're the divine, like I call them the lesbian power couple at the top of the tree. But like they're both feminine. That's fascinating. And I just wanted to keep digging in more and more. So that's where that came from. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
And do they have corresponding? Do those correspond directly to a tarot card?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that?
Actually, all of the spheres, they're numbered 1 through 10, and they correspond with the minor arcana of the tarot. So all the aces go with Keter, the first sphere, and all the twos go with Hokmah, the second sphere, and so on. It's interesting that the paths, the lines connecting all those circles on the glyph, are aligned with the major arcana because there's 22 paths and 22 major arcana cards. And you would think, well, but the spheres, they're the most important part of the tree. Why wouldn't they be with, the fool's journey, the big cards of tarot? And it's like the spheres, the Sephiroth are sort of static states in a way. They are a specific kind of energy, but the paths are the experience of moving between those different states. So in that regard, the journey aspect of the fool's journey of tarot works really well on those paths, going from this state energetically to this state. You're going to have an experience, so that experience is demonstrated in the tarot cards of the major arcana.
Thank you. Fascinating.
That's fabulous and beautiful. We need to take a break. It's an exciting topic. It's a lot of fun. I can see we have more comments. And don't worry, I'm going to bring your comments in, but we're going to take a quick break. And I'm going to go ahead and feature Brighthawk so she can offer a very awesome story.
So this story comes to us in honor of my friend who we mentioned earlier, Martha Joy Aft, gave this story to me, and was a Kabbalah teacher and a thoroughly awesome human being. So a story, let it come and let it go. Now, this is the story of the very beginning, creation. In fact, on the first day, the Creator created the dog, and told the dog, okay, here's your job. I want you to sit by the front door, greet everyone that passes by, anyone that comes in, and I'll give you 20 years. And the dog said, wow, wow, wow. Wait a minute, 20 years? That's a long time to be barking. Tell you what, I'll take 10 and I'll give you back 10. And Creator agreed. And so on the next day, the creator created the monkey. And the monkey is told, you are to do the following: be entertaining, do tricks, help people have a good time. I'll give you 20 years. 20 years for doing tricks? That's a long time. The dog gave you back 10, so will I. Now, the next day, the creator created the cow. Moo. And the cow was told, okay, I want you to spend time out in the sun, give milk to the farmer's family, take care of the farmer's family, and I'll give you 60 years. And the cow says, moo, that's a long time in the sun. Tell you what, I'll take 20 and I'll give you back 40. Creator agreed. Moo. And the next day, the creator created the human being. And the human being was told to laugh, play, eat, marry, have a great time. And they were given 20 years. And the human said, what? 20 years? No, that's not enough time. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll take those 20 plus the 40 the cow gave you, the 10 the monkey gave you, and the 10 the dog gave you. That equals 80, okay? Creator agreed. And so this is why, my friends, we spend our first 20 years playing, eating, drinking, having a great time. We spend the next 40 years providing for the family, working really hard. We spend the next 10 years doing monkey tricks for the grandchildren, and the last 10 years barking at everybody that passes by. This is the meaning of life. A story, let it come. Poof, and let it go. Thank you, Martha Joy.
In the land of Africa, there lives a hippo who learns to overcome being different through an ecstatic dance experience. Sometimes life is sweet, and sometimes life stings. It's up to you to decide. What are you willing to be? Asks the honeybee. The firefly reminds us that only you can shine your light. The butterfly speaks of the wonder of transformation, while the moon helps the hippo feel a confident glow. Find out what happens in a hippo dance trance. This beautifully illustrated book presents expressive artwork through gender-neutral characters that deliver messages about being yourself, perspective, and personal transformation. Order today at brighthawkproductions.com.
Hello, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our little break and our little story time with Brighthawk. That happens to be like my favorite. I think it's hilarious. And look, even Dana said, "What a riot!" Yeah. All right, and I really am enjoying this conversation with you today, Enfys, and I appreciate you bringing this to, bringing it out to the world. I think it's really important that queers in general harvest a spiritual life, because I feel like it's been taken from us. It's sort of been stolen from us in a way that doesn't fit nor belong. And our spirituality doesn't have to, control us and dictate us. It should help guide us and help us with personal growth, maybe help us discipline ourselves or things like that. But not, it's not meant to be something that chokes you. It's meant to be something that helps you grow. And I feel like that's what you've done with this book, Queer Qabala. And I feel like it's such an important message that there are so many paths. Like, think that's a really important thing. So I want to thank you for offering this beautiful magic into the world.
Oh, thank you very much. I stand on the shoulders of giants. There are so many wonderful queer spirituality books coming out. I mean, yours, Hollis, is out there. And then we've got some of my favorites, like Outside the Charmed Circle by Misha Magdalene was really foundational for, me writing my book, and Queer Magic Power Beyond Boundaries. That anthology was also really foundational for a lot of what I did. So, in a lot of ways, I owe this book to so many others who have been blazing the queer spirituality trail before me. And one of the things, it's funny, after, Llewellyn accepted the book, I started hearing about, like, oh, this other person actually also teaches queer Kabbalah, and this person over here. But I couldn't find any of their info like online when I was doing research for the book. I'm like, there has to be more people who've come to this same conclusion, right? And yeah, there have been. Lots of us have sort of independently gotten there. It's just no one wrote a book until I did, which I kind of wish they had, because then I would have had that. It probably would have helped me understand my gender identity a lot sooner if I'd had this sort of way to teach available to me. But yeah.
Sounds like both you and Hollis had a similar experience in the spirit sword of saying, it's you.
Yeah.
You're the one.
Why
Like it or
doesn't
not,
this book exist? Why doesn't it exist? Fine, I'll write it.
Right, exactly. And I feel like there is a certain calling to doing a book, and if you hear the calling, please don't worry so much. I think one of the things that Brighthawk actually we had talked about numerous times when we talk about doing your calling or answering a calling. Don't worry so much about what people might think of you when you do it, because that you can't control. But one thing that can really inspire you to get your butt moving on it is to think, instead, what people would suffer if you didn't do this.
Hmm.
And that became a really easy thing for me to see.
It's like light a match on your inspiration.
And that became very quickly all of the young non-binary people that are coming into their 20s and into their Saturn returns, which happens between ages of 27 and about 35 in there.
The quarter life crisis, as it were.
Right. And a lot of us, I know for me, I started searching spirituality before that, but I had a major spiritual awakening during that time.
Same.
And I feel like if I had had a book like mine available, I would have been able to figure some things out maybe a little bit smoother. And maybe in my 20s, I wouldn't have had so much time feeling less than sacred.
Exactly. And that's, I talked earlier about the frustration of reading these brilliant books on Kabbalah that unfortunately were really patriarchal and a lot of times kind of racist and kind of sexist and kind of xenophobic and ableist and all of these things all in one. It's like, oh, but you're so close to being like the perfect book for this. But for me, it's like if I had had an introductory book that was more like the book I wrote, I think I could have dealt with those other books a lot easier. Uh, it's like, yeah, there's some great stuff to find in like Dion Fortune's mystical Kabbalah. And you're probably going to write some swear words in the margins here or there because you're just like, ooh, that's really racist, Dion. Maybe don't say that. Like, there's some stuff in there, but luckily it's the minority of the stuff she wrote. The majority is really good, but it's easier to take that if you've had a foundation of like, okay, this isn't inherently a racist, sexist, xenophobic, ableist tool. It's the universe. It's everything. It's everybody. We all fit in here, and it represents everything that's manifest, including non-binary folks, including people who are not heterosexual, even people who just maybe feel a little bit of an outsider. We're all represented in this tree, and it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. I was excited to share with people. And hopefully, my hope is not only that people who are new to Kabbalah will find this to be a more palatable introduction and one where they can see themselves in their spirituality, but also so that people who've been studying it for a long time or teaching it a long time have a different way to look at it and be maybe even more inclusive in the way that they teach it or share it with other people.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, right? Developing rituals that don't have so much of the gender in it was a really important thing that I had to work on too. Like, just so that when people, you know, I wanted to make sure that it was possible. You know what I mean? It is possible to move away from the binary. It
Mhm.
definitely is. It's not as hard as some would have you think.
Right?
I wanted to address Dana's is Israel
Mm.
Regardi, A Garden of
Mhm.
Pomegranates. This is a book that
Yep.
inspired meaning to Kabbalah for me, and the middle pillar, which is the same author. It talks about the different pillars and how they interact. I've never thought of it as gendered, just leaning of assertive or passive. Yeah, it's hard to say. I read the middle pillar, but really long time ago.
Yeah, I've read some of Regardi's work as well. And yeah, I mean, there are ways to approach Kabbalah where you don't, lean into the gender as much. If you just call them the pillars of force and form, the pillars of, mercy and severity. But it all keeps kind of coming back to that whole this is what masculine power is. It's, projective, it's positive, it's, all these things. And then feminine power is receptive and passive and dark. And it's like, those just sound like what our patriarchal society thinks masculine and feminine are, not the ways they are within the divine universe or the way they've always been perceived throughout humanity either. Like you talked about earlier, the people who were non-binary or two-spirit, they were the shamans, they were the wise people. And it's this idea that everything is the way the 1950s decided gender roles had to be is no, that's not even how it is everywhere today.
Right. Exactly. And I think that things are changing, and I think they're meant to change. Like, I think even talking about we were listening to a talk today about different generations
Mm.
and thinking about what each generation has to go through and what their parents went through and then therefore applied. So I have a millennial child, and I definitely raised my child like a Gen Xer, which is very simple. I will never treat him as terribly as I was treated. And that's pretty much how I approach parenthood. Okay. And I think apparently most of my generation did that. And so as a result, millennials uh, tend to have what some people like to call, usually boomers, usually call it entitled. And I
Mm.
go, well, maybe that's true, but the things that they're entitled to, I kind of like them, like equality, a clean environment, love from
Safety, health,
yeah,
yeah.
um
The Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just
right,
For
yeah.
example,
just
yeah.
basic things. And yeah, so but I find it fascinating that that's where it came from. That's where that sort of energy that you tend to see. And I think that that's on purpose, because when you back up and look at the really big picture, like even back into the 1700s and back and future, eventually we'll probably move away from binary thinking. Eventually all people will be loved and equal, or at least I'd like to believe that. And someday we'll all live in harmony with Mother Nature. That would be great, right? And so these are the kinds of things that I like to believe that are going to come up. And for sure, we've made it better if we look in our history. Because for sure, racism was a bigger problem 100 years ago. And and yes, we still have problems today and we need to improve them. And thank God we are. Because as a Gen Xer, I felt very stuck there for a while. I'm so grateful for millennials. So I'm like, thank God. Thank God they're stepping into their power and they're taking us where we need to go. And I think that there's something to that when you start to really think about generations that have come and gone and how we are changing spirituality, the way it looks, the way it feels, and who gets identified or talked about, and how all people, and like trying to bring the love forward, which I really appreciate. I know it seems
Exactly.
really simple, but it's not.
If it were that simple, things would be very different, wouldn't they? Yeah. Well, one of the things with the book, my part one of the book is here's all the things that are just inherently queer about Kabbalah. Here, just it's already off the shelf. It is a queer spiritual tool. Part two is about, okay, how do we relate to the different aspects of it as queer people? And so, kind of the things you're talking about is going through that experience of, stepping into your power and finding what you need and what maybe you're lacking in your life that you need to seek out. uh, Giving folks that opportunity. And one of the things I hope happens is that straight cisgender people read this and learn more about what it's like to be a queer person and develop more empathy or have a better time explaining things to people. Uh, One of the things I wrote about on my blog is the itchy sweater metaphor, where people are like, okay, look, I know you're non-binary, you're 42 years old. Why did it take you so long to figure this out? You were fine with she, her pronouns like 2 years ago. What changed? And it's like, well, okay, um, let's pretend that when you are born, your parents give you a sweater and you wear it every single day, all day long. It's the only thing you wear. They got it for you. They think it's great. And you go through life and you're like, this is a really itchy sweater. But the longer you wear it, the more you kind of back burner the itchy feeling because it's so constant. You're just like, it's just background noise, right? So you go through life. And then at one point you say, hey, that person's sweater looks a lot softer than mine. Or, hey, maybe not everybody feels this way in their sweater. And one day you get to try on another sweater, and it's the softest, most comforting, warm, amazing thing you've ever worn. But you got to put your old itchy sweater back on afterwards. But now you realize how itchy it is because you've had that moment of comparison. So then you're like, okay, well, maybe I can wear the really soft sweater around certain people or for different occasions, but I got to put the itchy sweater back on for work or when I'm with my family. But every time you put it back on, that itchiness gets louder and louder until it becomes unbearable. And so I'm like, yeah, she, her pronouns were okay, but they were part of that background radiation of itchiness that I didn't realize was there until I tried something else. And they, them pronouns are a very soft, comfy sweater for me. And I hope everyone's able to find their comfy sweater if they don't have one already.
That's a great analogy. So good.
Yeah,
We can all relate. We can all relate.
It's really helped a lot of the boomers in my life to sort of begin to get it.
Yeah, and yeah, I think there are a lot of boomers out there. I know you guys, if you are non-binary, that can sometimes that generation can be hard to be around. Um, but there are some boomers that actually do love and support non-binary people and work really hard to try to help us. So, and I appreciate those people that do.
Yeah.
And I feel like although people are generational, at the same time, each one of us are like kind of fun and unique. And there's definitely a group of people or an energetic type of person that tends to be a little bit more empathic, I think.
Yeah,
So,
like we're coming out of the age of Pisces, which loved binaries. Everything fits in box A or box B. That's it. That's all there is to choose from. If it doesn't seem like it fits, make it fit. Like put that square peg in that round hole if you have to. And now we're going into, of course, the age of Aquarius, where there's a lot more gray area, and we're acknowledging, hey, maybe everything isn't two absolutes. And maybe there's more we can discover there. It's really exciting and also kind of scary for people who got really comfortable with those two boxes they could choose from.
yes, exactly. Um, exactly. And I think it's just uncomfortable for some people, but they're getting used to it. I do want to we only have a few more minutes, so I want to bring in Dana's question. What separates queer Kabbalah from traditional Kabbalah? Is it rewording the Sephardic meanings in a way that connects with the divine feminine?
From where I sit, queer Kabbalah is Kabbalah. I think there's a lot of it that is inherently queer that I did not make up. I'm just like pointing it out. Like, hey, all these things are kind of queer, you know? There's this third pillar. We've got, you know, masculine names on the feminine pillar and feminine names on the masculine pillar. And we've got like intersex representation on the tree, which is really cool. And that comes from about 100 years ago. And I didn't put it there, but that's the magical image for Hod, the 8th sphere, is an intersex person. So there's all this stuff that's already there. And just people need to connect those dots and be like, oh, this is already a really queer magical tool. So I'm not trying to reinvent Kabbalah because it doesn't need to be reinvented. It's a really great spiritual tool. But one of the things I was taught is that it's incumbent upon every generation of Kabbalists to add more and deepen our understanding of the tree, like to add more correspondences, to find the things that maybe other people have overlooked. Like the people who came before weren't necessarily wrong, but their information and their context was incomplete, as is ours. You know, none of us have the divine perspective because we're here, we're manifested here in Malkuth, the 10th sphere. It's really hard to see that sphere 1 from the sphere 10 position, but you can get reflections of it. So I don't think Queer Kabbalah is different, but the book Queer Kabbalah may help folks who are not fond of the way it has been traditionally taught and want to find something that is more queer inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And I appreciate that. And I think, Dana, you might enjoy it since you are discovering some of your gender discomfort. Maybe you might enjoy that. And Dana has one other question. I use the Kabbalah to watch my back. Can someone match energies coming at themselves with a Sophie's on the tree and do a workings to mitigate its effect?
Probably. It's not something I've personally done, but you know, give it a try.
Right? Exactly. Dana's a fun magical person. And Eve here, they say binary makes it easy for people to put things in neat little boxes, good, bad, black, white, etc. Grays. Non-binary requires thinking because it challenges the notions of false dichotomy. You must decide between this or that. No, there is something between there as well. We're like, don't ignore those other parts. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
When I came out to myself as bisexual when I was 17, I was having this massive crisis about it because I thought I had to choose between being straight or lesbian. And I was like, but both, and it took me an astoundingly long time to be like, wait, both is an option. There is this thing called bisexuality. I just didn't know anyone who was bisexual back in like 1997. I only knew there was a character on My So-Called Life that was bisexual. That was it. That was the only representation I had. I was born a little too late to really get into like David Bowie, unfortunately, was not. I knew David Bowie from Labyrinth, and much respect, one of my favorite films. But yeah, I didn't know any non-binary people who said they were non-binary. They didn't have a label for it that I was familiar with at the time. And same with bisexuality. Like I had heard it at some point, at least, but I had this head slap moment of oh, right, I don't have to pick one or the other. I
I
like
went through
both.
I went through a very similar thing, but it was back when transgender just started, like people started to take hormones and there were support groups and I went to, I'm just going to share this because I think this happens to a lot of non-binary people, is that you go and then everybody assumes you're going to transition. Everybody assumes you're going to get hormones and a surgery. And I was just kind of overwhelmed by it all and backed off right away. And in fact, I wrote a blog back then. It's called Do I Have to Choose? And that's
Mm.
exactly what it was about was, do I have to choose to be a man or a woman? Like, why do I have to choose? And I really fought with that for a really long time. And eventually, I did turn that into this book, Divine Androgyny. But I definitely had that experience. So, and this is a symbol for alchemy. So my book is
Nice.
alchemical based.
read this.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that I had that sort of a similar experience where there was no word for it back then. It was you were trans or you were not.
Right.
And there was not even a name for cisgender people. There's none of that. And so I'm so glad that we have a language for it now. And I'm grateful to be able to sort of, I feel like I'm in the front with the machete, tearing down the corn. So y'all can come through the maze of gender, figure out your own way through. But I tried to clear some stuff out for you. And I feel like I can hear Enfys over there doing the same thing, just a few rows down.
The
Sort of
genderqueer corn maze. Yes.
and just trying to clear it out for us so that when other people walk behind us, all they have to do is be careful for the broken stuff right on the ground.
I
So
hope the genderqueer corn maze leads to an apple orchard with a disco, because there was a viral tweet recently about at the apple orchard disco, this thing happened. I'm like, I want to go to an apple orchard disco. Heck yeah, that sounds like phenomenal time.
I've been
But yeah,
to a forest, yeah, but not an apple orchard. But I've done a forest disco.
yeah, awesome.
Which
Well,
is
forest disco sounds
interesting.
great too.
Disco ball and all. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Anyway, we're out of time. I'm gonna pull 3 cards, 3 tarot cards for you, friends, from my queer pride deck, Love is Love. And every
Love
single
it.
one of these cards is done by a different LGBTQIA artist. So I'm gonna feature my thing real quick so you guys can see the cards really well. This is the Page of Wands, and this is our past. This is a reminder. Actually, this is a great reminder for today. This is a reminder of all of the shamans that have come before us, all of the shamans that have walked before us, all of the wisdom that has been brought through, that we can honor it, we can harvest it, we can celebrate it, and we can even bring forward what we think needs to be brought forward. And that's exactly what this card is all about. It's about bringing through tradition and bringing through magic from ancient times, especially indigenous and other traditions. Okay. And that's what this is all about. It's to remind you of the ancient history of magic. And this is for the right now. And this card is all about searching our emotions and making sure, checking in, making sure we're feeling empathic about others. And you can see that there's some cups spilled here in the front. And mostly it seems like our person is focused on these cups in the front, right? But they've forgotten about these 2 beautiful cups that are still afloat behind them. And you could see that they have the moon in their ears. And this is all about getting in touch with our cycles, especially when we ignore the good stuff and only see what's spilled. Okay. And this is about trying to remember to be grateful for the good stuff that's right behind us that we just forgot to look at. Okay. And everybody does it. We all do it. Okay. And in the future, as you're going forward, be aware of this. This is your magic. This is your energy and how you wield it. So this is the Page of Swords, and you can see that this character is sort of cutting through the air with their sword. And swords usually represent thoughts in action. So in other words, having a thought and then doing it. Okay. And so that's exactly what this is all about. And to be aware of those thoughts, okay, to be aware of how those come forward and how you deliver them, and knowing your power, knowing that from the ancient traditions that you have learned about, the ancient traditions that you've earned about and celebrated, bring through what you think is best. Make sure you reflect on your empathy and your own experience, not just what you've spilled, but the good stuff too. Okay. Not just the bad stuff, but the good stuff too. And bring that forward into your amazing power as you step forward and make the world a better place. And that's exactly what this is. This is a Page of Swords. And so this is the Page of Swords. This is the 5 of Cups. And this is the Page of Wands. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed our tarot reading today. And hold on. Okay. So I appreciate you so much, Enfys. I appreciate you so much for being on the show today and bringing forward this beautiful topic, in my opinion. I think it's fantastic that you wrote this book, and thank you for doing
Thank you. Well, I appreciate both of you and all the wonderful work you're doing, clearing the brush with your machetes. And both of your books sound amazing. And thank you for doing this show and lifting up queer spirituality for more people to find. This is fantastic work. And thank you both.
it. Yeah, you're welcome. One last question from Dana wants to know if they can get your book on Kindle.
Absolutely. It's on Kindle. It's also available as an audiobook. And
Yeah.
I was so excited because I asked at just the right time. I said, okay, I know I don't get like any say over the audiobook at all. Could you get a trans or non-binary narrator? And they did. And I'm so excited that there's a non-binary narrator on
Oh,
the
that's
audiobook.
fantastic.
I
Great.
said, please don't make me read it myself because it will take forever because I will find every imperfection and be editing it for 10 years. And they're like, no problem. And I was like, but can you get someone who's non-binary or transgender? And they said, yes, we can.
That's
So
great.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
I'm glad that they
Thanks.
honored you in that, and that we can also find the Audible version. And I'm betting that you get more of if they order from your website. Is that true? So Dana would
I
want to.
will confess that I have not got the online shopping cart set up just yet because right about the time my book came out, I suddenly had to move house. So that has been a big part of what I've been doing for the last month. But I will be getting it up there eventually. Basically, wherever people want to purchase is fine. The links I have on my website to all the major stores, I do get like a tiny kickback if they use my link on Amazon or if they use it on bookshop.org. I generally just prefer people where possible order it where they know they're going to get it in a format they can read it and that they will enjoy it, but also if possible to support their local independent bookshops and local independent pagan shops and all that kind of stuff, like your new age shop down the street. Please make sure they stay in business and support them.
Exactly. And I totally appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I have
especially since she has a performance.
I
this
have
weekend.
I have a performance in 2 weeks at a little bookshop in Denver called Second Star
Awesome.
from the Right.
Love it.
Yeah.
And Izzy is my drag king, and I will be arriving as Mbu, the hippo.
Dancing Hippo.
Awesome.
My live
So
character.
it's good fun stuff, and so it's good different ways, different things. I'm so grateful for all the queerness in the world. I want to say thank you to Brighthawk. Thank you so much for being here and doing this with me all the time.
Always a pleasure.
And I appreciate your wisdom and all the beautiful things that you do in the world. You bring great lights to the world.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for doing this.
And I want to thank you, Eve and Dana, and everyone else tuning into the show today. And even if you're listening on the podcast later, thank you for subscribing, liking, sharing, spreading the word. Please help us get it out there. And we appreciate you. We deeply appreciate your subscriptions, as that's what helps us make this all worth it. So I appreciate it to all of you. Thank you. And thank you for watching Rainbow Shoal. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for watching Rainbow Soul. We are so grateful for your presence and listening in this past hour. Be sure you're subscribed and get notifications so you can join us and catch us every Sunday night here live. We appreciate you sharing, commenting, reacting, and inviting others to the show. This is a show for you, so tell us, who would you like to see on the next show? What topics inspire you? You can always find replays, more about the host, blog posts, merchandise, information about games and contests, and social media links at rainbowsoul.show. We love to show our gratitude with fun and games and contests with prizes that celebrate who we are as a community. Rainbow Soul holds the intention to explore consciousness and spirituality in cultures with a deep reverence for cultural roots, equality, and inclusion. We are always striving to recognize the spiritual medicine available to all of us in the modern world.
We hope that you walk away knowing that you are perfectly valid in whatever identity you embrace for yourself and that you are sacred, just as you are. Thank you so much for tuning in to Rainbow Soul. Divine Androgen, a sacred path for gender variant people. This book details Hollis' story, including some insights into their traumatic childhood, their gender experience, and how they now celebrate empowerment as a non-binary person in a binary world. Hollis details a path for gender variant people for personal empowerment, acknowledging that all paths, all queers, are sacred. There is nothing wrong with anyone that is queer identifying. This book supports any kind of transition, gender fluid people, queer folks, transgender people, anyone bending the binary. This book supports healing from our past, defining our truth, and harvesting our authenticity. This book supports the spiritual part of the journey and lands in your own expression of authenticity. A path of consciousness, not religion. This book is not religious and is in no way related to Christianity except perhaps in opposition. Choose empowerment. Choose to honor your divine androgen. Order today at www.divineandrogen.com.